the human self and Iblees. Translation of Iblees O Adam. Translated and edited. Dr. Ajaz Rasul, UK. The Quranic concept of Satan and perspective on human desires, emotions, intellect and wahi. Author. Ghulam Ahmad Parwez. 7 Ruh. In the Quran, Ruh is also mentioned in relation to the Malaika. It is stated about Laylatul Qadr. Therein descend, in this night, the Malaika and Ruh according to Allah's law, with his virtuous Amra, to the earth. Opening parenthesis. 97. 4. In the Arabic language the meaning of Ruh is of power, and this has been called Ruh al-Quds. At another place i.e. power of great vastness. Say, Ruh al-Quds has brought the revelation from your Rabb in truth, in order to strengthen those who have Iman and as a guide and glad tidings to Muslims. 16. 102. Another term for Ruh al-Quds is also Ruh al-Amin. With it came down Ruh al-Amin. 26. 193. 7.1 Jibril, Gabriel, and Ruh, in other words, such a power which is Amin i.e. the very best holder of Amanat and the manifestation of universal peace, its name is Jibril. The Quran states, say, whoever is an enemy to Jibril, for he brings down the revelation to your heart by Allah's will, a confirmation of what went before, and guidance and glad tidings for those who are mu'minin. 2. 97. In another verse, along with Jibril the name Mikael is also mentioned. These names are from the Hebrew language. 2. 98. 7.2 Ruh and Malaika. In Surah Al-Ma'arij it is stated, the Malaika and our Ruh ascend unto him in a day, period, the measure whereof is as 50,000 years. 74. In Surah An-Naba it is stated, the day that our Ruh and Malaika will stand forth in ranks, none shall speak except any who is permitted by Allah, most gracious, Ar-Rahman, and he will say what is right. 78. 38. As stated earlier, we cannot know what the constitution of this Ruh is other than that it is the energy created by Allah which is related to the domain of Amra. This support was available to Jesus. 2. 253. 5. 110. 7.3 Ruh meaning the Wahi of Allah. In the Quran by Ruh is also meant the Wahi of Allah. It is stated in Surah An-Nahl, he does send down his Malaika with our Ruh of his command, to such of his servants as per his will, saying, warn, man, that there is no God but I. So follow my laws. Be fearful of the consequences of disobeying these laws. 16. 2. This same subject is also referred to in these verses. 40. 15, 42, 52. In these verses the meaning of our Ruh is the Wahi of Allah which descends on the Anbiya. Along with our Ruh there is the addition also of Min Amra-e He, or Min Amra-e Na. In these. In light of this, the meaning of this verse of Surah Bani Israel becomes clear where it is stated, they ask you concerning our Ruh. Say, our Ruh is by the Amra of my Rabb, of knowledge, of secrets of the universe. Given to you it is only a little. You cannot have more than this. 17. 85. In other words, by our Ruh here is meant the Wahi of Allah. Its clarification comes in the next verse. This was that same Ruh al-Quds whose support was available to Jesus i.e. Muqaddas Wahi from the direction of Allah. 2. 253. 5. 110. 7.4 An important point. Before moving forward, cast an eye on this Muqaddas verse in which it is stated, the Malaika and our Ruh ascend unto him in a day, period, the measure whereof is as 50,000 years. 74. and relate with this verse the one in which the core principle of the law of evolution has been explained, which is about important matters related to the secrets and hidden affairs of the universe. It is stated, "He rules all affairs from the heavens to the earth. In the end will all affairs go up to him on a day. Period. The space whereof will be as 1,000 years of your reckoning." Opening parenthesis. 32. 5. The meaning of both of these verses has come before you under the topic of Adam, where it was noted how according to the law of evolution a tiny seed which holds within it thousands of vast possibilities, slowly and by degrees, by obtaining nourishment, gradually reaches its point of completion. This rububiyyat, i.e., for something to reach its state of completion from its initial beginning, takes place according to those forces which are functioning in the universe in order for the divine law to produce its result, and which have been defined using the term malaika. 7.5 Elucidation of one fact. Before we end this chapter and go on to the next subject, it appears necessary to shed light on one fact. Though the story of Adam, as already noted, is a metaphorical narration of man himself, this does not mean that the things mentioned in it are merely allegories and similes and have no existence of their own. Man is mentioned in it and man himself is present in front of us. But since his existence is in a visible physical form, hence the thought never even crosses our mind about it that it is merely an allegory. Other than man, Iblees and Malaika are also mentioned, so should we reject their existence just because these are not visible? This will mean that we should deny the existence of all invisible powers, although we do not do so. Just look at the world of science itself. How many invisible and non-perceptible entities are present whose existence we acknowledge, and then evaluate these powers, and the human mind begins to spin. Merely contemplate these radio waves and assess the universal powers. For example, an individual in the corner of some room in London moves his tongue and the radio waves instantaneously take these words and cause them to reach to the ends of the earth. Not only this, but no obstruction can intervene in the path of these waves. They pass through thick, solid walls in the same way that the rays of light pass through glass. These are the magical tricks of radio waves or rays according to science. But what are these waves themselves? Science is hanging its head in bewilderment. What can you ask it? According to research up until now, this tremendous force which seems to have made the limits of time and space disappear, is merely a name, the nature of which we have no knowledge of. But since science has given it some sort of name, hence everyone accepts it. Just suppose if 50 years previously some individual had stated that Allah has appointed such an angel on earth so that if you utter any word from your tongue it will carry it on its wings and, in the twinkle of an eye, make it reach every nook and cranny of the world. Leaving aside others, even scientists themselves would have laughed, and by declaring it to be a superstition of the era of ignorance, you would have given proof of your enlightened thinking. The question is, can the fields of scientific knowledge claim today that they have discovered the nature of all these secrets and unknowns, these visible and invisible forces, of this vast and expansive universe? Let us listen to what is the state of the worlds of knowledge about the nature of things. 7.6 What did Plato say? 2,500 years ago, when Plato was presented with this question, what did he say? He stated, "And now, I said, let me show in a gure how far our nature is enlightened or unenlightened. Behold, human beings living in an underground den, which has a mouth open towards the light and reaching all along the den. Here they have been from their childhood, and have their legs and necks chained so that they cannot move, and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning round their heads. Above and behind them a fire is blazing at a distance, and between the fire and the prisoners there is a raised way. And you will see, if you look, a low wall built along the way, like the screen which marionette players have in front of them, over which they show the puppets. And do you see, I said, men passing along the wall carrying all sorts of vessels, and statues and figures of animals made of wood and stone and various materials, which appear over the wall. Some of them are talking, others silent. You have shown me a strange image, and they are strange prisoners. Like ourselves, I replied, and they see only their own shadows, or the shadows of one another, which the fire throws on the opposite wall of the cave. True, he said. How could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? And of the objects which are being carried in like manner they would only see the shadows. Yes, he said. And if they were able to converse with one another, would they not suppose that they were naming what was actually before them? Very true. And suppose further that the prison had an echo which came from the other side. Would they not be sure to fancy when one of the passers-by spoke that the voice which they heard came from the passing shadow? No question, he replied. To them, I said, the truth would be literally nothing but the shadows of the images. At this stage we do not wish to indulge in this argument whether the philosophy of forms that Plato has put forward through this metaphor is based on fact or not. We wish to state that, according to these scholars, knowledge of the nature of things was only this much. This was the state of human thinking about the reality of things 2,500 years ago. 7.7 And what is being said today. But to where man has reached after this period of 2,500 years, hear this not from me, but from the lips of a renowned scientist, Sir James Jeans of the modern era. He states, it is the general recognition that we are not yet in contact with ultimate reality. To speak in terms of Plato's well-known simile, we are still imprisoned in our cave, with our backs to the light, and can only watch the shadows on the wall. And this distinguished figure of the world of science concludes his brief but great treatise in these words. So at least we are tempted to conjecture today, and yet who knows how many more times the stream of knowledge may turn on itself. And with this reflection before us, we may well conclude, adding, what might well have been interlined into every paragraph, that everything that has been said, and every conclusion that has been tentatively put forward, is quite frankly speculative and uncertain. We have tried to discuss whether present-day science has anything to say on certain difficult questions, which are perhaps set forever beyond the reach of human understanding. We cannot claim to have discerned more than a very faint glimmer of light at the best. Perhaps it was wholly illusory, for certainly we had to strain our eyes very hard to see anything at all. So that our main contention can hardly be that the science of today has a pronouncement to make. Perhaps it ought rather to be that science should leave off making pronouncements. The river of knowledge has too often turned back on itself. This is that point at which the world has reached up until the present time regarding the reality and form of things. And what does the world have the right to merely reject the existence of something because it does not come within the domain of its comprehension? Further details will be covered under the chapter on Wahi. 7.8 Now let us see the other extreme. This was the state of science. But on the other hand, orthodoxy is no better than this. Even those who promote acceptance of Malaika, Iblees, jinn, creations of fire, or these kinds of other similar invisible things, want that kind of acceptance which is in their own mind. The difficulty that man has is that because his mind cannot imagine invisible things, he therefore turns these into discernible forms. Leaving Malaika etc. on one side, his mind even envisages the concept of the absolute being of Allah in human form. The carving of gods and idolatry are a manifestation of this very same mentality. The state of those people who prefer orthodoxy is such that they consider the acceptance of invisible things as correct only when these are accepted with those same details and constituents which are imprinted on their minds. And if someone differs with these, then they declare him to be misguided and condemned, and considering him to be a denier of Allah's power, immediately resort to declaring him as an apostate. But they do not comprehend that the difference in concepts about the composition of these things, provided that this is not outwith the Quranic limits and domain, cannot be taken to be equivalent to the rejection of Allah's power. Let us suppose that an individual considers satanic whispers to be the temptations and provocations, sentiments and feelings, inclinations and biases of the human self which must lead man from the defined straight path of Allah. Then from this there is no aspersion cast on the power of Allah, provided that he accepts that the human self is the creation of Allah. If the forces of Iblees and those of the Malaika have their own existence in the external world, and if these are the internal traits of the human self, then in both cases these are the scintillating displays of the infinite powers of the Creator of the Self and the universe. But why should there be any suppositions whatsoever in these matters? To whatever extent the Quran takes us in these matters, it is correct to only go to that extent. The Quran wishes acceptance of these things. Its demand is not about understanding them, the nature of their composition. By describing these things, its aim is solely to show what their relationship is to human life. What effect does this relationship have on the human self, and whatever has been proposed by the Quran for the acceptance and acknowledgement of these effects, how can this be acted upon? If, in the pursuit of determining the nature of Iblees, man himself comes under the spell of Iblees, then this knowledge will take him into Jahannam. Hence, in these matters, we will need to remain within the domain of the Quran because it is based on knowledge from beginning to end. As far as the relationship of the Malaika or Iblees with our life is concerned, the Quran has clarified this reality in the story of Adam. The Malaika are those forces according to which the different parts of the system of the universe are busily engaged in the accomplishment of their respective duties. As per the divine law, these forces of the system of the universe have been subjugated for man. These forces are about the domain of the universe as well as about the domain of the human psyche. But since all of these are functioning according to the divine commands, hence evil plays no part in them. These are entirely good. In this arena of the universe, man has been sent as the custodian of all these forces, but subject to the commands of Allah. Hence, his duty of life is declared to be this, that he should harness all of these forces of the domain of the self and the universe. He should make all the potential powers of both this external world of highs and lows and the internal universe of the human self subject to his obedience. But he should not obtain work from these powers according to his own desire. Instead, he should keep his desire under the obedience of Allah's commands, and in this way establish such a system through all of these astounding forces in which the full means for the development and nourishment of the eminence of human beings are present. And man no longer remains the subject of anyone other than one Allah. These are the forces of the Malaika. As far as Iblis is concerned, by this is meant those emotions of man which adopt transgression against the wahi of Allah. If these emotions are kept within the obedience of the laws of Allah, then good alone emanates from them. 7.9 Summary of the discussion. This complete system of the universe is functioning under this law of Mashrit of Allah, which is related to the domain of Amra. Those forces through which the commands and decisions of the domain of Amra are established are called the Malaika. Since for the correct and precise procedure for the functioning of this system of the universe it is essential that there is not any kind of flaw in the obedience of the commands and principles related to it, nor any interference from anyone's personal intentions and authority, hence the duty of the Malaika is to obey the commands of Allah unquestioningly. They simply do not have the power to disobey. One of important duty of the Malaika is to communicate the wahi of Allah to the messengers. The messengers then pass this wahi on to other people, and by acting on it demonstrate how the kingdom of heaven is established in this world. The support of the Malaika is included with this Jamaat-e-Momineen. Hizbullah, through whose hands the government of Allah is to be established. They shower the glowing rain of peace and tranquility on their hearts, due to which resoluteness in their step and firmness in their resolve is created. Contrary to this, they are also the holders of divine punishment for those parties who are enemies of haqq and justice. They are also the messengers of death and the record keepers of human deeds. On the day of judgment their role is to give glad tidings of righteous life to the inhabitants of paradise and to impose Allah's humiliating punishment on the inhabitants of hell. These are the Malaika on whom, according to the Quran, having Iman is essential. During the age of ignorance, the human mind had also invented various kinds of false beliefs about the Malaika. The Quran removed all of these superstitions and false beliefs one by one, and presented an accurate and factual concept about the Malaika. But the Quran has only demanded acceptance of the Malaika, and other similar invisible and non-perceptible forces. It has not asked us to determine the reality of their nature and form. We only require to see what the relationship is of these things with our life. As far as our visible universe is concerned, the Malaika are those forces of nature which have been subjugated to mankind. This is what is meant by prostration to Adam. Hence, the duty of man is this, by harnessing all of these forces, to extract work from these according to the divine law, which he can find in the pages of the Quran. As far as the connection of the Malaika with the Anbiya is concerned, since the world of messengerhood is quite different from ours, thus we cannot understand what the particulars are of this matter. The Quran has used the word Ruh for Jibreel-e-Amin also, as well as for Wahi. The Malaika and Ruh are important means and resources in the process of evolution of the universe, which are operating both in the domain of the self and in the heavens. This functioning of theirs, what kind is it? We cannot know the reality of this.